Pre-Suasion, a revolutionary way to influence and persuade. Part of the series, Mediation Book Reviews by instantmediations.com. That is our topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast by instantmediations.com, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube, the Instant Mediations app, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact dependent. Hi, everyone. This is Mac Pierre-Louis, attorney, mediator, and arbitrator, working throughout Florida and Texas.
And Natalia Łowska-Czajka, advocate, mediator, and arbitrator from Warsaw, Poland.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sylvia Mayer. I'm an arbitrator, mediator, and attorney located in Houston, Texas. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Hi, ladies. So we are doing a book review today on the book Pre-Suasion by Robert Cialdini, or if my European Italian speaker can help me pronounce it correctly,
Cialdini.
Cialdini.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and so one day you're probably going to have Mr. Robert Cialdini to come on, and he will correct it himself. But until then, we have our guest star, Sylvia Mayer, bankruptcy mediator, who does her own series on bankruptcy mediations with us. She's here to discuss this book because it made a big impact on her. And so she wanted to just share some thoughts, the takeaways she's had on it. And also, we've discovered that, Sylvia, you've actually published on some of the core themes in this book, specifically receptivity, and resolution. And so I wanted to share on my screen. If you're listening to this podcast, please check out the YouTube version so you can see what we're looking at. We'll also post these links that we are showing on the screen on the YouTube description and on the blog post. But Sylvia, let me give you the floor. Can you talk a little bit about some of these core themes from the book before we get into the actual book? Well, I'm sure we're going to get into the book just by you discussing what you wrote. This was published back in April 27, 2022. And can you discuss receptivity? Not sure why I can't enunciate those words so clearly, but being receptive, it is a key point in life and communication, and it's a very important part of mediation. But Sylvia, please, what is receptivity?
All right. So first, let me just explain that it is a hard word to say. So let's just start there. And the book Pre-Suasion, at its core, it is all about receptivity. The concept behind Pre-Suasion is all the things that you do to help someone get into a place where they can accept your ask. So it's how you persuade them. And that all really boils down to receptivity. And receptivity is being receptive or open to hearing new information, new ideas, new opportunities, new solutions. And as mediators, we all know that receptivity is the key to mediation. When you go into a mediation, until a party becomes receptive to settlement, receptive to acknowledging or at least understanding the other side's views, you're not going to settle. And that's what really drew me into this book. His focus is on persuading and influencing people. And I don't think of myself as a mediator as someone who's really truly trying to influence others. But what I am trying to do is help people reach a point where they're receptive, to open up their receptivity so they can find a path to resolution, to settlement. So this book has a lot of information in it, and it's huge. And as you can see, I have been through it and tabbed and marked and highlighted. And I have pulled out and identified 3 specific topics for us to focus on today. And we discussed I might come back for us to do a second episode to talk about 3 other really important topics. I definitely recommend reading or listening to the book on your own. If you go to my post that we were sharing just a minute ago on the screen, you'll find at the end that I also share a podcast that has an interview with the author. And so if you just want to get a snippet of what the book's about, you could listen not only to today's discussion, but you could also go enjoy that podcast as well. But so let's talk a little bit about receptivity and all the myriad of ways that you can help someone become more receptive to information and ideas, suggestions, and opportunities. And so the three that I want to focus on today are words or word choice, focus, and connection. And I'm happy to walk through those with you. They're all outlined in my article, but let's discuss, because I think these are really important things for us to keep in mind as mediators when we're helping parties try and find their path to resolution.
So, speaking about words and choice of words, because that's actually the topic that we already covered with you, Sylvia, from another perspective and another book. I would want you to share with us what words from the book and from your personal experience did you find those who open people to be more receptive in mediation?
So one of the interesting points that Cialdini makes is that your word choice matters. And so it's not necessarily that I can or he can give you a list of words and say, if you say these three words, people will become receptive, because it depends on the context. And so he shares in the book a story about he was once invited to speak at a conference for a healthcare company. And prior to the presentation, he was having a conversation with the person running the program who said, so I just want you to know we have rules about what you can and cannot say in your presentation. You're not allowed to talk about bullet points, business targets, attacking a problem, or beating the competition. And Cialdini was like, okay, what can I say then? Because I always have bullet points. I always talk about you need to focus on your business targets and attacking a problem and beating. Why do you have me here if I can't talk about beating your competition? Isn't that the point? And the guy said, you can talk about the things you were going to talk about. You just have to call them something different. We are a healthcare company, which means we are all about healing and helping people. And words like bullet, target, attack, beating, those are the antithesis of what we do. So here's what you can say instead. Instead of bullet points, we have information points. Instead of business targets, we have business goals. Instead of attacking a problem, we approach a problem. Instead of beating our competition, we outpace our competition. And Cialdini is very honest in the book. And he says, at first I heard this and I thought, oh, this is so hokey. But then he went to the conference and he followed the rules and he gave his presentation. And over time, he has come to appreciate that it is brilliant, because words matter. And how we communicate, the words we choose to communicate with people matter. Because if you use certain words, they could cause someone to quickly trigger their fight or flight instinct, versus using words that help open up their mind, help them be more connected, more accessible, more receptive. So, I have often said in other contexts that when you're talking to somebody about a difficult topic, you do not want to use you. You want to use I. There's a huge difference between you don't care about me because you never call me back when I call you, and I get scared when you don't call me back after I call you. I'm scared that something has happened to you. Enormous difference between you versus I. That's another example. That's my own example of how words matter. And we as mediators need to be conscious of that. We need to be thinking about the right words to use at the right time.
Thank you, Sylvia. So let's go to the next one. That's focus matters. So can you give us a little bit of explanation here?
Sure. So throughout the book, Cialdini says over and over again, what is focal is presumed causal. And I will confess that the first few times I read this, I thought, well, that's an interesting phrase, except for I really don't have any idea what that means. And so as I continued to read the book, I started to understand what he meant. And then I started to understand that what he means is when he says what is focal, he means what we're focused on, what you're looking at, what your attention is focused on. And by what is focal is presumed causal, he means that whatever you're looking at or you're focusing your attention on, that is then causing you to shape your views on whatever it is. He gives a whole bunch of different examples. A lot of them are really straightforward, and some of them are much more complicated, and they're all eye-opening. And it is that particular section of the book I highly recommend to people to read or listen to. But I'll give you a couple of quick examples. One is a really simple example. Somebody did a study where they were looking at what's the impact of the landing page on a website. So they figured out that people tend to shop for furniture looking for a couple of different factors, and they honed in on two: comfort versus dollars. Some people are shopping, say, for a couch or a sofa. They're shopping for one that is comfortable. That's their primary driver. Other people are just looking for something that's economical. They have obviously want it to be comfortable, but their focus is the dollars. Presumably, the people who are interested in comfort are also interested in the dollars, but there's a difference between what's your top priority. And they found that if the landing page for the furniture store had fluffy clouds in the background, then it would draw in more customers who would buy furniture based on comfort, versus if they had pennies dropping from the sky or in the background, that would draw in more customers who were focused on the dollars, on the economics, whether they were saving money to buy the furniture. And so that is a really simple example of what is focal is presumed causal. He then goes on through a series of exploration of, in the criminal investigation context, interrogations and confessions. And there's been a lot written about the issues with potentially false confessions and things like that. And the studies that he focused on were studies that really honed in on camera placement, which is not something I ever thought of before. And what they determined is if the camera is placed so that you are watching the interrogator, so the police officer or the FBI agent or whoever the person is who's asking the questions, then people tend to believe that the suspect is innocent. They're watching the interrogator, and now I'm going to speculate. I'm going to speculate that they're watching the interrogator and they feel like they're being interrogated. So now they internally identify with the suspect. So they believe in the suspect's innocence. Switch the camera. If the camera is focused on the suspect, viewers more likely than not assume that the suspect is guilty because they're watching them, it's their focus, and they then project onto them guilt. And they found that if you just change it so that the camera is showing both equally, so there's neither one is more focal, then you get a neutral outcome. And I thought that was fascinating. And so, really it's interesting to think about how this plays out in a mediation. In mediation, it's not a lot of visual. Like there's no issue of is the camera on one person or the other, because so much mediation occurs in caucus rooms. We're in separate rooms. So they're not even seeing each other. So that's not a factor. But what I do see in mediations a lot is what some people call anchoring bias, where they hone in on a particular piece of information and they will not waver in their belief that that piece of information is the single most important thing, or that that piece of information is true regardless of all the information to the contrary. And that anchoring of that particular piece of information becomes an impediment to the mediation. And now I know why. It's because focal is presumed causal. They are so focused on that data point that they cannot see any other reason that could be causing the situation. There's nothing else that draws their attention. And you have to find a way to break through that.
And actually, what you've just said, Sylvia, brings us to a very interesting point, because this is also about, for example, online mediation. The way you put people, you arrange the boxes on the screen, for example, on Zoom, may influence how people will be reacting. So whether it is a speaker view or gallery view can actually influence the entire process. And please let me remind you that even if you do a caucus mediation, there might be instances where you do the opening statement to everybody. So, for example, where I am in my jurisdiction, we pay attention to the fact how we are addressing the parties. And in the opening statement, we already tell them, teach them about, let us say, Zoom as a tool. Please make sure that you are seeing everybody in the gallery view. You press this and this so that you actually have everybody equally on the screen. So for the neutral outcome, as you said. And the third thing we were to discuss today is the connection. And what do you mean by that?
So this particular section of the book was really interesting, in part because a lot of the examples, he gives a lot of examples, but a lot of the examples and the ones that I'm going to focus on today dealt with the Holocaust. And so that really tugs at your heartstring when you're hearing these examples. But the point is that we have to find a way to connect with parties in mediation. His point is, in order to have influence on people, to persuade people, you need to connect with them somehow. You find a familial connection, a cultural connection, a shared hobby, a vacation spot you have in common, something that gives you a connection. And in the context of what Cialdini's talking about, you then build on that connection in order to have an ability to persuade them, to have influence. But that connection is what opens up receptivity. And in mediation, we can use connection to help people become more receptive to their opportunities to settlement. And so I'm going to share two examples from Cialdini's book that are both Holocaust related. And so in 1940, there was a career diplomat, and I'm going to apologize now, I will probably mispronounce his name, named Chiun Sugihara. And he worked in the Japanese consulate in Lithuania. As the doors were closing to Jews all around the world, a group of Jewish people in Lithuania went to the Japanese consulate and asked Sugihara to issue travel visas so that they could immigrate to Japan. Sugihara sought permission from Tokyo, and Tokyo said no. So he asked again, and Tokyo said no. He asked a third time, and Tokyo said no. And then, in defiance of the rejection from the government, he went ahead and issued thousands of travel visas to Jews in Lithuania before he was recalled by the Japanese government to Tokyo. And according to the book, literally at the train station, when he's about to head back to Japan, he's writing more visas. He's writing as many as he can, knowing this is it. And then at the end, when he couldn't write anymore, he apologized that the fact that he couldn't save more lives. He saved thousands of lives, and in exchange, effectively ended his career. So why did he do this? The theory is connection. Many years later, after his career was completely destroyed, and his life, was definitely changed dramatically as a result of this decision, he was asked, and he explained. He grew up with a father who was a Japanese official also. This father was stationed in Korea. Now, for those who don't, you may not know this, but there was a tremendous amount of bigotry between Japanese and Koreans. And so the Japanese were very discriminatory towards Koreans. But his father was stationed in Korea, and they opened an inn while they were there in Korea, and they welcomed people of all kinds, which was very unusual at that time because you would not normally have Koreans and Japanese or people of other origin mixing together. And he learned from his family. It was his family's view that we are all humans. We are all part of the human family. So years later, when he faced that moment where the Jews were begging him for visas, he looked at them and he realized we are all part of the human family. They are asking for my help. I cannot say no to my family. And so he did it. That sense of connection saved those lives. Now, fast forward to 1942. We now have a pretty large Jewish population during World War II in Japan. Japan is allied with the Nazis, with the Germans. It's now 1942, and the Nazis are pressuring the Japanese, their allies, to adopt the German final solution for the Jews who are in Japan. And I assume everybody knows what the final solution is, but that was the extermination of all Jews. They wanted them to ship all the Jews in Japan to Germany so that the Germans could exterminate them. A guy named Joseph Meisinger, who was known as the Butcher of Warsaw, was sent to Japan to lobby the Japanese government to do this. The Japanese officials in Japan, who were tasked with making this decision, decided they wanted to hear from both sides. They wanted to understand why. And so they called together the Nazi representative and representatives from the Jewish refugees. The Jewish community sent two rabbis, one who was a scholar and the other who was known for his humanity, who was a much, much older rabbi who had been known for his service in the community and his connection to people. The Japanese officials asked the rabbis, "Why do the Nazis hate you so much?" And the scholar struggled. He had no response. I mean, how do you answer that question? But the rabbi answered, "Because we are Asian like you." His quick thinking and intuitive ability to build that connection saved 26,000 lives. It is believed that that connection, that what he meant is they are Aryan. They are trying to exterminate all who are not Aryan. We are Jews. You are Asian. Neither of us are Aryan. We are Asian like you because we are not Aryan. And they will look down on you too. That's what was implicit in his message. But with that quick thinking, he built a connection, and the Japanese officials said no. And they never exported the Jews in Japan to Germany to be exterminated. The Jews in Japan were safe. It's a pretty amazing thing.
It is. And again, Sylvia, thank you for that. I do believe that making connection is a way not only to build agreement in mediation, but it's also a way to live, especially nowadays when we're facing so many challenges. And the war that you've just brought up is, for example, for Europe, is no longer a theory or a concept from the history books, but we are facing it within our continent. And therefore, I do believe that if out of this little episode, everybody, a mediator or any party to mediation that wanted to listen to that, will take one takeaway: making a connection is meaningful and can save lives. And that would be it from us for today. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Right. Thank you so much, Sylvia. We'll continue this another time. Thank you.